What's up, everybody? I want to welcome you back to Switch Talk, the perfectly pocket-sized podcast where we discuss all of the games for the Nintendo Switch that has stolen each one of our hearts. We are covering the latest, greatest games, and we're also going to be taking your suggestions for what we should play, so we'll open that up on our community pages. If you just Facebook search Switch Talk or find us on Twitter at SwitchTalk30. We'll be interacting with you there, and we'd be happy to play games with you throughout the week as well, because this is all about us trying to play more games, and don't we all want to do that? So we force ourselves to do that with starting this show, and you know, I'm so glad that we did, because we get to play gems like the very latest, greatest, Bulb Boy. Yeah, Bulb Boy.
Yeah.
Some of you have heard of Breath of the Wild. And the innovation, the landscapes, the gameplay mechanics, the art style, and then there's Bulb Boy. Who wants to start this conversation off? Oh, one more last thing, because this is important. I always want to mention this. We try to keep the conversation to 30 minutes or less. Again, pocket size. We want to fit inside of your schedule. Also, one other thing, I want to give a big shout out to Gary Gray and the podcast Topic Nintendo. I was able to have some great conversations about gaming with him, so definitely check that out. Another shout out to Mega Dads Live. If you just search them out on Twitter, Mega Dads blog, you can follow them. Great stuff, amazing artists. They do podcasts. They're at 2DCon this week, and it's just basically amazing guys. It's two brothers that are doing podcasting and a whole range of things together. So shout out to all you guys. So glad to support you, and you support us. So thank you for that. Who wants to take this Bulb Boy thing seriously? Because I'm starting to feel a little sick thinking about it. Who wants to kick us off?
A little sick.
I think starting off, we should at least tell people, for those who don't know what this game is, what the heck this game is.
Please explain it to me.
This is a horror adventure game. That is that's the exact title and genre that they like to refer to themselves as. So, yeah, it's kind of an old school point and click, but not really pointing and clicking type game. Stuff that we kind of grew up playing on the computer and whatnot. And yeah, it's very artistic. It was created by two guys. Literally, they created the whole thing, and then I think they brought in two other guys for some additional coding and music and stuff. But literally, a very small indie team created this game, so it's pretty unique. I'll say that much.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm glad you kind of hit on that about the description first, because I think that long and short of it with this game is it's hard to describe. I played through the game, and it's one of these short indies that's quickly having people talk about the Switch becoming the next indie machine, you know, like the Vita used to be. So we come out with all these perfectly priced small games from these developers that are, you know, passion projects. This one in particular, though, kind of defies, you can't really put it in a box. I read the description about the game only after we all agreed to play it and finished it, and afterwards I absolutely had to go back and read the description. So, and you kind of hit on it, so I really want to hit on just a couple things. If you go to the listing on the eShop or Nintendo's website, it's a multi-award-winning 2D horror puzzle adventure about a boy with a glowing head. This next part is about the story, which, when you play it, doesn't really connect, quite honestly, with me almost the whole way through. But it says, one gloomy night, Bulb Boy wakes suddenly from a frightening nightmare to discover that evil has overshadowed the Bulb house. His family has disappeared, and there are horrid monsters lurking in the shadows, gathering with courage, and he uses his glass head to save everything he loves. And the final part of this description simply says, poop, in many sizes and proportions. That's all I have to say. David, can you weigh in? What are you thinking, man?
It's definitely a unique game, and as someone who really enjoyed a lot of those point and clicks, it did get me some flashbacks of those. But it definitely wasn't as well executed. probably due to being, two people had worked on it. I do think, too, that the way the game was marketed is really weird, and I think I'd mentioned that to you guys earlier. Like, why is there Japanese text on the screen? What does that have to do with this type of game? And it doesn't really feel as in-depth in some ways. Like, I felt like a lot of times you could solve puzzles just by, like, click every inch of the screen type thing. And I remember playing games where you would have to go around the screen, find all the items, combine certain items, take the item back, use item on this object, and then, it would take like hours. And there were some of those old point and click games, I would like spend hours on the same scene. And this is like, it's a little bit more, I think, watered down and modernized. I don't know if that's going to be bad or good, because I imagine most people don't have the patience to play through those types of games anymore, so maybe it is for the best. But yeah, I think you're right about the description kind of not really articulating what the game was, though. I think maybe they should have made it a little bit clearer. Hey, you played games like King's Quest, Goblins, Monkey Island. Yeah, that's what this is. This is a throwback to that. And horror is probably a pretty strong term for what this game is. More weird.
And you're right. It comes at you like that point and click. But unlike some of the great classics, I think that like you mentioned, it's super simple. It's not. And I thought as soon as I started the game, I thought I was going to have to combine items, etc., just like you said. But mainly, it's just kind of find the three things. Period. And the levels are not huge and sprawling. There's not a whole lot of backtracking necessary. It's kind of just a linear. Go to the next area, look around a little bit, and you're going to find it. So it comes at you at first like that trial and error point and click, super simple, which to me does not mix and was not fun. Just kind of commenting on that. Clay, what were you saying?
I wasn't saying anything. I think the strongest point of this game is its art style, and I think that's the reason we chose this one. It had a lower price tag. This is not an original Switch game. This game's been out for a number of years now on a lot of different platforms, but it just recently, within the last couple months, came to the Switch. And so we were looking through, and this was a game that kind of popped out to me just looking at the screenshots. And I wasn't as stoked that it was a point and click. Those aren't like my favorite types of games, but the art style alone was enough that I was like, we should definitely check this out, because it is very unique, and I think it is really cool and different. And so I think that is by far its strongest suit. Yeah, there's gross stuff, and it is weird. It kind of has a Binding of Isaac feel at times, but I think the mix of the art style and the fact that the main character is usually the only light source in a room or area, and so the whole visual aesthetic of the room or area is all based off where you go, creates shadows and lights up different parts of the room. Makes for a really, really good time. In fact, some of the nights I was playing this, I was turning off all the lights in my house and just playing with the music really loud. And there's some really cool atmosphere within the music and stuff. So I enjoy playing these kinds of games, especially in like October near Halloween. So I kind of was bummed when we were playing it. I was like, man, I wish I could have saved this for Halloween, because I love playing these kind of games at Halloween time. But so if you've been on the fence about this, I suggest picking it up at least come Halloween. Overall, I had a great time with this. I think it sounds like you guys are more so Antonio's being a little negative here, but I really liked it. It's back. Simple, but it and I don't think it's too long, and I don't really think it was too short. I think it was about the length it needed to be. If it was much longer, I think it would have been, it maybe would have dragged on a little too much. So I was pretty happy with it overall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be, I was criticizing it a little bit. I'm not trying to be too negative. I did think it was fun. Overall, it just wasn't quite what I was expecting. Because initially when you look at it, you don't even realize it's a point and click. Once you realize it's a point and click, it's not really the point and click you were expecting. And I guess that's probably one of the bigger complaints with me. But once you get into it, I think it is kind of fun. Some of just the weird things that happen are kind of unexpected. Like the first time I took my head off and threw it up at something, and I was like, what? I didn't know I could do that. And there's a lot of really cool moments like that where just something really weird and bizarre happens. And it's just kind of really interesting atmosphere. And even though the puzzles aren't particularly clever, I think it does kind of sort of fuel itself forward to try to get to that one weird moment to the next. It does feel almost to me like it should be a game, like more of a mobile game, because the way it's sort of simpled and watered down a little bit, it feels like they took like some of those old point-and-click games and tried to make it appropriate for mobile devices. And this is a game that is on Android and iOS as well. And part of me wonders if that was a big part of the design factors, that they were expecting to sell more on those platforms. So that's maybe why it's a little bit less complicated than a lot of people were expecting, because it's, it's not designed to be something you're going to be hunched over your computer for like 8 hours straight like you were in the old days. It's a little bit, more bite-sized. Well, and I think it's fine for what it is.
The interesting thing about that is you can't even use the touchscreen on the Switch for this game. You can use the touchscreen on your phone to play this game, but you can't use the Switch for that. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I agree. From a visual perspective, I had the most fun just discovering how odd and weird the game could be, and that's kind of like what it's going for. And I got definite like Tim Burton vibes, or it reminded me of some like Ren and Stimpy type things, where it's just trying to be gross all throughout. And certain elements are in particularly, I enjoy that when it kind of goes into that funny thing. And sometimes in certain areas, and I don't want to spoil it, I was like laughing out loud, just giggling at like certain things that they would throw in there. And they were, some well-animated piece of the level, or something that you do that's, again, surprising. And I think when it's surprising and funny, it's at its best. And, it's definitely unique in the art style as well, because it's its own spin on it. Everything has that kind of greenish shade, and I enjoyed it. The game is roughly 6 hours long, 6 to 8 hours. And depending if you get stuck, getting confused with some of the gameplay mechanics like I did, you might spend a little bit longer. But I enjoyed myself. About 2 hours in, I fell in love with Bulb Boy. And I wanted to know more about the story. I was interested. So I went from like this initial interest to, falling in love. And then the next thing we were going to talk about is like controls or gameplay. And I think that goes right along with difficulty for me. And maybe you guys can touch on it. But for me at that point, the game changes so much within that 6 to 8 hours as far as what you do. It was kind of confusing. I didn't know that Bulb Boy had abilities. It starts out like the game is trying to tell you this is a horror thing, and it's going to be all about him being, like a bulb and lighting the environment around him, and everything else kind of being dark. But it doesn't really do much with that mechanic, and instead he gains abilities later. Or instead it's more about, it's not about collecting things. It's about avoiding combat and things like that. What did you guys think about that? Actually, what you're doing in the game?
I think the only part where I was a little thrown off, and I think it affected me playing through it, is at one point in the game you control Bulb Boy and another character, but it doesn't really explain that to you. And so, it splits it between the two joysticks. And so, I was completely confused, and I got stuck for quite a while. And come to find out, after doing some research, I wasn't alone in this. I think a lot of people I saw online were having issues where it took them forever to realize it, because there's just no indicator that you're supposed to do that. And so other than that, though, it really didn't bother me. It's really just walking around until an arrow pops up over something, and then hitting the A button and seeing what happens. I mean, there's a Nintendo Power Glove at the beginning of the game. You literally pick it up, put it in your hand, and then he just like shakes his head and puts it back down. I thought
it was gonna do something. I was like, "This is awesome!" Right? He finds a Power Glove. Is it gonna? No, and then it's just like a little call out, and that's it. What'd you think, David?
I wonder if that was in like the other versions, or if that was a Switch exclusive or not.
Interesting.
I don't know. Interesting
question. The way that it goes is, I think that the way it was developed is they tried to do a lot and tried to keep things relatively fresh. So again, you kind of gain very unique abilities where you're not just kind of moving slowly around. All of a sudden you have this mobility, or you're in another level where your enemies seem very overwhelming when the enemy ratio isn't like very high. Again, there's not a whole lot of that, but then this is all about kind of speed and where you are and how quickly you can get through like a maze-ish type level. Not to spoil it too much. So basically, you enjoyed kind of the, hey, let's figure out what's happening right now. And that variety got me stuck and kept me dying and added, I guess, some gameplay length to the game, which is good. But yeah, it's interesting. It kind of like, here's point and click, and it's super easy, and you don't have to put too much thought into collecting things. But at the same time, figure this out, because we're not going to tell you. And I don't know. I mean, it's a unique thing. I think that they tried to do a lot, and I don't think anything was particularly horrible to do. It was just, I don't know, I was just confused, and I'm not sure if I hated that. Dave, do you have any thoughts on it?
I think in general, I mean, there's a little bit lack of polish in general. Yeah, sometimes things are a little bit confusing, but I think a lot of that's chalked down to being it's an indie game made by two people. And I think for what it is, I think they did a really good job. Yeah, it's not as good as the games they were probably inspired with, but they really make use of like limited money, limited time, limited people of making something that I doubt any of us could ever make with just two guys. So I think it's a good artistic accomplishment. It's not going to be, it's not a must-have game for the Switch or anything. But if you're into that type of game, you like puzzles, you like point and clicks, and you have I can't even, how much was it again?
I want to say it was around
$10?
10.
I remember it was.
Yeah,
it's really cheap. So it's and I'm sure that it'll go on sale and whatnot too, because I know I've seen it for even less on some other platforms. So I imagine that this is going to be something that I think a lot of people are going to maybe should think about picking up at some point. But save it for when you're bored. This is not like something you have to go out and get because it's out. Wait till you're not playing anything else on the Switch.
Yeah,
another game, something like.
Especially
like
because
that.
there's like nothing really unique to bringing it to this platform.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, you can take it with you, I guess. So but you could do that with your phone too.
Yeah,
I'm just struggling to think of anything that there's nothing like, oh, you can do this that you couldn't do on another platform. So that might hurt the replayability. I don't know. The thing with the Switch right now is there's so many indie games out there, and a lot of people are like, oh, the Switch is only doing well with indie games because there's no virtual console, blah, blah, blah. So there's just a lot. There's a lot to choose from. So I honestly think if you look at this art style and you say it's not for you, then just leave it at that. But if you look at that and go, hey, that's pretty cool, and you're down to spend $10, I think it's worth it. But also, as far as whether or not something's worth it, I think comes down to the replayability of it. Now, what do you guys think about it? Is this a game that you'll play multiple times? From what I could tell, there wasn't really a lot of like alternate routes or alternate endings or anything. It's pretty cut and dry. This is how it's going to go.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, it might be something that, like, years later I might think about after you forget everything. But, just the nature of games like this, like, once you figure it out, it loses a lot of its charm. Like, so, I don't know. And I don't think the story in and of itself is probably really good enough to replay it knowing the puzzles. But...
yeah.
Maybe, who knows, maybe 10 years down the line where I don't remember a damn thing about how I got to, X and Y or what I did, then, maybe we worth a replay, but yeah, I think that expect to pay the $10, get out a few hours worth of gameplay, maybe like, I've heard some people even beat it like an hour and a half, so, wow. Yeah, it's like, I'd say it's probably like depending on how insanely smart you are, probably like 2 to like 8 hours maybe.
It's basically an IQ test simulator, basically. I think
right,
that I went back and had to record the beginning of the game to do some game capture for us, and it was just tedious. Mm-hmm. I didn't really have too much of a good time going back through. I see this game as having a lot of potential, and I see all the different ideas that they tried to touch on. And I believe that if they would just maybe focus on 1 or 2 of them, like, again, the light-dark mechanic, or the fact that he could kind of throw himself and take on abilities of different... I can't remember if they're, like, basically dead things or objects. Not to get too much into it, but he had this ability-type thing to it. I think that there's some gem gameplay mechanics there that if they really went crazy with that... horror, goofy funniness that I would play a Bulb Boy 2 if it ever happened. So that's the best thing that I think I could say about it. The most fun you could probably have is really hype this game up and tell people you must play it, and then sit somebody down in the room and then just watch them play, and then just wait until they get to the big turd monster, and then just look at them, and they're going to look at you like, if they've gotten that far being patient with you and you've violated their trust, and they look you in the eye with that anger, and then you just go, yeah. And then just that's pretty much it. But yeah, overall, decent game. Pick it up and play if you're ever prompted or tricked into it.
For the record, if there was a Ball Boy 2, I would totally buy it. So I think that says something about this game. Yeah, I think that they've set a good groundwork, and I think they could expand and make a larger game, maybe with some deeper storylines. I think that could be great. Another issue that I notice, it's not a huge one, but it is something I've seen people talking about, is most point-and-click games are strong based on the story, which is all based around the dialogue. You meet characters, you have unique dialogue with them. This game has little to no dialogue in it whatsoever, and I think that it's intentional. It's part of, you know, the style of this game. That's what they were going for, but it is an interesting, you know, choice that they made to kind of go without, you know, a lot of dialogue. It is a lot of just ambient atmosphere.
Right. I don't know if you've ever played a game called Goblins.
Nope.
I used to love that game, but that literally is what it reminds me of, because it's about the same single scene, except it's a lot more complicated. And you have three different characters, multiple items, but everything's single screen, and you have to figure out how to go from one screen to the next, and there isn't much of a story.
Huh.
So it's like, think of it as, it's like a really hyper complicated Ball Boy, and I don't know, I'll send you a link to what it is later, but it gave me kind of a little bit of vibes of that. It's probably the closest thing I can think of that I'd played before to it.
Man, I think
Nice.
A little tangent here. I would totally play Lemmings on the Switch. Getting my favorite. Let's talk about like the story wise. I had to read the description afterwards, and it's told with some flashbacks. I think it's intended to be slightly confusing, but overall, you know, you're trying to save your grandfather from, I think, being possessed or something like that. I'm not sure. In the beginning of the game, I thought that it was a super like. I thought that Bulb Boy was like some type of like, I know it's called Bulb Boy, but like his grandfather totally looked like a bong or something like that. I thought the whole thing was supposed to be like a drug trip, and it kind of is, and things get really odd right away. So I thought that, oh, okay, somebody really tried to make this like out of its world, because certain environments go from a regular house, and then it quickly devolves into, you know, way different environments, and I thought that was very interesting. My favorite part of the game was when they just kind of really let loose and say, hey, this is funny and odd. So that, for me, I think that throughout the game, those little callbacks like the Power Glove, I mean, it's worth it for the playthrough alone, I think, to just experience it. The things that they were trying to do, because there's a couple funny moments and gems in there. What was your guys' favorite part?
Turd monster.
I thought it.
Well, tell how how do we get to the turd monster? Because it's a whole buildup of different
You're right,
things.
yeah.
Should I even spoil
Don't
it though?
spoil it. If
Yeah,
people don't know where
alright,
the turd
yeah.
comes from, you don't want to be the one to tell them.
Right.
Fair enough. It's just so
That goes for
interesting,
life,
though.
too.
But
Not just games.
true.
It's true.
Yeah, we really don't
Yeah.
want to ruin it. It would be a disservice to society as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best moments of the game, so I think you want to experience it. It's just like that one moment, like, oh, so this is the type of game I'm playing. This is where we're going.
Any thoughts?
My favorite part of the game, besides that one, that's, I think, the obvious answer. Not that you shouldn't have said it, because it's clearly probably the best part. My other favorite part is at the end. It's basically the final boss / level. Not to spoil too much, but you end up going down inside, and then there's all these different, you know, traps and triggers and things. So it gets a little more dungeon-esque at the end, where you have to repeatedly go through these different areas and open things up and unlock things. And I don't know, it's pretty cool. I could see them doing a lot more of that in the future with different things you have to trigger and unlock, and a little more backtracking than usual for the game. So I thought that was pretty strong. And visually at that point, it kind of changes a little bit, from what the rest of the game kind of looks like. So, but it's still pretty obviously simple. So
excellent. For all of you who are listening, definitely check out Bulb Boy if you have extra scratch, or if you want to support indie devs on this great system that we're experiencing. And if you have any hidden gems, because there's a lot hitting the system right now that you think that you'd like to hear us talk about, go ahead and send us a line. Again, follow us on Twitter. You can search us out on Facebook, and definitely on YouTube, where you can find the show. Also, audio version is available on iTunes, and we really appreciate each and every one of you who are watching and listening. We've been getting a lot of support, and super appreciative. Thank you guys so much for watching Switch Talk.